Okay guys, I got my control panel top taken loose. It's actually loose from the bottom of the box, and I'm going to go outside and do a few things to it, and then I'm going to paint the top of it white. So we got our hinge fully on and everything. We have our holes on here so we don't have to do any more lining up or adjusting for the hinge. We got the hinge where it's going to be permanently now. What we need to do is I want to round these corners here. I thought about leaving it like it was sharp, and I said, well, not only is it a little bit dangerous for little kids running around, it's liable to chip if you was to bump it or scrape it over something, and if you're moving it around, you don't take the control panel loose in the house, that could actually gouge up a wall or something. So I'd like to round it. It would also make the T-molding easier to install if it's got a rounded corner. So we're going to round these corners off using a belt sander, and we're going to put a groove around here for the T-molding. I got to do a little adjustment for that. What I'm going to do is get a scrap piece of plywood that came from some of this that I was building the control panel from, and I'm going to adjust the depth of the slot cutting bit and keep doing it until I get the proper depth to where the T-molding will fit perfectly on there, and hang just a little bit proud of the top of the control panel, because we're going to have a coat of paint on here. We're going to have the artwork, which has very slight thickness, probably a 32nd of an inch to it, maybe a little more than that. And then we're going to have plexi on top of this, or Lexan. And it's not so much that I want the Lexan or the plexi to kind of, not overlap the edge, but I'd like for the artwork to have a little bit of the edge of the T-molding protecting it, so it would never peel up or anything. And if I put plexi over this like I'm probably going to do, that will probably never happen anyway. But I know that the blue, when I installed it here on the cabinet, it sat just a little proud. If I made the inside edge of it on the cabinet, if I made the T-molding even with it, it would set a little proud to the other side of the cabinet. But it was okay because I put new black veneer on it, and the laminate that we put on there, and it made it the exact width of the T-molding. I just got lucky with that off the bat. But on here, we're going to have to adjust it, and I still want to keep the bottom of the T-molding even with the underside of the control panel top, but I've already measured it, and it's going to come up just a hair, and it should be just enough for the artwork just to kind of bump into and just have something kind of protecting the edge of the artwork. And it may give just a little more than that. If so, that means just a little bit of the edge of the plexi. If I cut it exactly to the correct dimensions, it should just keep the edge of the plexi from ever lifting up if somebody was to catch a finger on it somehow or something. Oh, and I forgot to mention, I am going to use the belt sander to round the corners off, but what I'm doing is I'm going to take this Gatorade bottle cap and just set it pretty close to the corner there. And I'm just going to mark around the edge of it just to give me kind of a guide to go by, and I'm going to do it on the upper and lower part of the control panel top, and that way as I'm slowly going with the belt sander, it will give me a line to go by so that I know that I get a good rounded edge to it. You don't have to do that. You can eyeball it if you want to, but it'll probably look better if you make sure you don't have one side going in a whole lot farther than the other side. Somebody might notice it visually, but you can use any type of cap, any size you want. This right here is, about like a 50-cent piece, larger than a quarter. You could probably even use a quarter, but just line it up and leave yourself just enough right here so that the pencil lid has something to rest on, and just a little bit on the bottom too, just barely, and just draw you kind of a round 1/4 of a circle there, and just sand down to the line and just barely remove the line. And if you do that on the top and the bottom, then you should have your pretty uniform curve there on each corner. But that's a pretty good method for doing that. You could also come in and take a jigsaw and just cut it out if you want to. But if I did that, I would probably come back and at least hit it with a little bit of sandpaper just to smooth it. Okay guys, everything worked out great. We've got nice rounded corners now, if you can see there. Came just up to my pencil line that I had on there before. Made a nice rounded corner. And I did the same thing on the underside with the pencil line, and what I did is I just kept going out and back with the belt sander, and I would look underneath and just take my time and make sure that I wasn't going over the line underneath or on top. I kept it good and even until I got right to the pencil line. Made a nice corner on both sides, and it made short work of it. If you have a instead of a fine grit, if you've got a coarse grit belt on your sander, if you're using a belt sander, be real careful because you can eat away this wood much quicker than what you think. You could really gouge it, so be careful. Right now we're going to take this out there, and I'm going to flip it over upside down and ride around it with my trim rider. I have went outside and set the bit to the correct depth for the T-molding, and all I did was use just that piece of scrap right over there, and I clamped it onto the railing outside, and I just adjusted the bit up and down until I got the proper depth for what I need to do with my T-molding. And my T-molding, I just want it sitting just a little proud of the top, and when I went out there and tried it, the first adjustment I had, it was almost dead where I needed. I just barely needed to bump it. But the board I was doing it to, I was trying a piece of blue T-molding just to see what it looked like. It was almost the perfect depth if the board was upside down. So I just have to remember to flip this upside down when I do it. I just didn't want to go through a bunch of adjustments to get it right the other way. Plus, the base of the router riding around on this side under here is much better than on top here. Just, you know, so you don't rough the top up any more than necessary. But since this is going to have paint and a decal applied and plexiglass, even if you did scuff it up some, it wouldn't hurt anything. But just make sure you know which side you're going from, and if your T-molding is, you know, if you get lucky and it has to be just dead center on your slot, well, then it doesn't matter which side you start from. Just make sure if your T-molding is going to sit a little proud on this side, or, you know, if somehow the slot needs to be a little lower or something, that you've got the right side before you start routing, or you'll end up making a big mess. Okay guys, thanks to the trim rider, we have us a T-molding slot all the way around now. Didn't have really any problems with it except for clamps. And I'll show you what I'm talking about in a minute. If you use plywood for this instead of MDF, you're going to have places like that right there. And it's where there's a weak piece in one of the plies, and it'll chip out and kind of fly out whenever you're doing this. But you see most of it's very uniform all the way across. It's just little places like that. You'll have a little chunk fly out, and that's fine because, you know, even if it does it on a corner, you've got so much T-molding to the left and the right of that that's holding that in there tight, that's not going to budge at all. And if you feel kind of funny about it, just stick you some hot melt glue or something in there. But you'll never even see it once all the T-molding's on. And it went great around our new curved corners there. Once again, the belt sander did a good job doing the curves. And then we come back with the trim rider and we did a really good job getting our T-molding groove cut. So now we're just going to take this real quick and put a coat of white paint on the top here. That way the graphics that we got from this old game will stick to it a little better than this porous plywood right here. Okay guys, so last night I painted the control panel top here. That was after we did our rounding over on our edges and our T-molding slot. And I just wanted to give it a coat of paint, something a little bit glossy. Let's see what this was that I used. It's Krylon Color Master Paint and Primer with durable CoverMax technology, but it's a white gloss. I wanted something that had a little bit of a gloss to it, something that I thought a sticker would stick good to instead of the grain of the wood, because that's like a real rough sanded plywood, and I just thought it would lift from that very easy, and I wanted it to stick to something. So I figured I'd give it a coating of this paint. So I did a quick sanding with a sanding block just to kind of smooth out and clean the surface, get a little bit of the pencil lines off, and make sure there was no dirt on that side. And then I blew it off with the air hose, and I went back and I used probably about, I'd say a little over half of this can. It's probably overkill, but I just wanted to cover it, and it had such a rough grain to it, it just soaked the paint up, you know. That wood just really soaks paint up. But I went outside and did that, and I let it dry for probably about 5 hours or so, and I left it outside on the porch, and I just made me a little tent over it with some newspaper, just so bugs or anything wouldn't land on it while it was drying. And let it dry out on the porch, and then brought it in, and it's pretty much the finish that I want right now, because it's just getting covered up. It's not a real thick finish, but you can really see the wood grain of the wood showing through. You can still see some of my pencil lines that I didn't completely sand off, but that's fine, because we just need something that's just a little glossy. And if you can see, I'm bumping into the cabinet. If you can see just a little bit of the glossiness from the paint there, that's all we wanted to do, just to give it something other than just that graininess and that texture of the wood to stick to. And I don't know how long is a good idea to let paint cure before you stick something like a adhesive sticker or something to it, but that polycarbonate stuff that I got from This Old Game is supposed to be really thick, and you know, it's got the 3M adhesive backing on it, so hopefully it will stick to this okay, and I won't have to let this cure for like a week or nothing. I think I could probably just put it on today, because this is supposed to dry to the touch within 10 minutes, and you can handle it within 1 hour. And it's been probably like 16 hours or something since I painted it, and I think that we could go ahead and apply that. But I'm kind of having thoughts about trying to route me a recess for the dust shield on the joysticks right here on each joystick hole, but I'm not sure if I want to do that. I kind of thought I would like that to mimic what I've done with my Mortal Kombat 1 and 2. A lot of people put their dust shields on top, and you know, the Mortal Kombat 1 and 2, they were made with a recess. You could actually put the dust shield on top of the control panel, but under the plexi and the artwork, which was on a very thin piece of like sheet metal, and it would rest above the joystick and on top of the wood of the control panel, but it was in kind of a little routed out area that's just slightly inlaid into the top of the wood, you know, and it's just like a circle about that big on top of the wood. And if you look at some of my past videos, I might have had something where I had the MK2 control panel took apart or something, and I might have showed you that. I can't remember, but anyway, you could do that with I guess it'd be like a plunge router bit, and you would have to have some type of guide. I have a round base on my little rigid router there. So what you'd have to do, still have the slot cutting bit in there, but the round base, you would have to have you some type of like a larger circle, something that's a guide that you would be able to just drop this down, plunge it into there with the correct bit, with a plunge type bit, and let the outside of this round base follow another circle, and it would help guide you around so you can make the proper size circle. But if I was going to do something like that, I'd probably use a few different types of larger circles. I don't know if it would be something you could get that's made out of metal or wood, or what you would do. I don't know exactly the proper way to do it, but it would guide the router in a circle and let you make the outline, and then you just have to go out and back and keep doing the inside of the wood until you get it all ate out to, like, you know, let's say a 1/16 of an inch deep or an 1/8 of an inch deep or so. You wouldn't want it very deep, just enough to let the dust shield rest down inside of it. Then you can put your artwork over top of it or whatever. But even therein, there's a problem, because my artwork is not on a piece of sheet metal like the Mortal Kombat's. It's just on that polycarbonate, and while it is kind of thick, it's probably like a 32nd of an inch thick, it could probably still, you know, over time it might sag down into that recess slightly. You might be able to notice it from the top of the control panel. It might not do it much if you have plexi over it, and if it's stretched good and tight, it may not, but it might detent just a little bit down into that recess. And also, since it is sticky, let's say you route this out successfully, put your dust shield in there and everything, and then you put your artwork over top of it. It basically encases that dust shield where you can't really get at it unless you remove everything. Well, you're not going to be able to remove the artwork to get to it if it was to get, you know, a stain on it or a spill or anything, because the artwork is stuck to the top of this. And it's very likely, if you didn't come up with some way to put something on the back of the area on the artwork where the stickiness was, it will actually probably stick to the dust shield itself, and it might be permanently stuck to it, and then your joystick couldn't move freely. So I mean, there's a lot of hurdles there that could be overcame, and I'm going to think about it a little bit and see. I might just forego that and just put the dust shields on top of the artwork and on top of the plexiglass and everything. And some people have said, well, when it's moving around, doesn't your dust shield scratch up the top of your acrylic, you know, or your Lexan or whatever? And somebody said you just put a little bit of felt on the back of it, and that makes good sense. I would probably just cut a pattern out that was almost the same size out of some very thin felt and glue it to the back of the dust washers, and then assemble everything. And with that on there, it would just slide around on your acrylic or your Lexan and wouldn't scratch it up. So it would probably work pretty good. I just don't really like the look of it sitting on top of there. A lot of people love it. You know, a lot of people, I can't remember if it was your MK Arcade Source or one of the other guys that, you know, mess around with arcade machines, but they said that they like sitting there and just flipping the thing, like playing with it while they're waiting on their turn to come up or something. You know, is just something that people did, like the original MK joysticks. We'd sit there and just flip the bat of the joystick, and it just, you know, the spring in it would just go bit, and everybody just, you know, that was just kind of a hallmark of using a hap competition joystick, was just the sound it made when you flip it. And, you know, I would do that playing Kano, you know, out and back, just to launch his knives out and stuff like that. But, you know, just little things like that. It's like nostalgia. Some people might remember those dust washers on top in the arcades because, you know, people were lazy and didn't want to mount them underneath, even if it was possible. And so that's something people might like. But it's kind of personal preference. You know, you don't even have to put dust washers on your joysticks if you don't want to. It might get a little dirty down in there, but if it's in your home or your home arcade, it's probably not going to get abuse like it would in an arcade. There won't be as much drinks and stuff spilt and stuff on top of it. And I'm not going to allow anybody to be drinking, you know, setting drinks on top or near my machines anyway. But there's just all kind of ways you can do it. And also, to be honest, since the hap competition joysticks mount to the bottom of the panel, a lot of people don't know, but the top of the hap competitions, from what I remember looking at, they actually have a recess built into the body of the joystick. It actually has a recess on top, and the dust washer will sit down in that recess. You can put the dust washer on the underside of the wood control panel, but on top of the joystick mount, you know, and then mount it like normal, and that dust washer will still move and circle around sitting on top of the joystick. You just won't get any protection from any dust right in this area or right up in here. It will keep dust from going on down in the machine, though. It'll still work, and I think that's by design. I've never mounted them that way, but I noticed that many times before. So there's just all kinds of ways of doing it, and I think I'll just go ahead and see if I get the artwork put on there, and you know, get my buttonholes cut out, get my T-molding on and everything, and hopefully I've left the T-molding sitting just proud enough at the top edge of the wood here that the artwork will look nice and have a good finish up against it. And if I'm lucky, there'll be just enough of it sticking up to just catch the edge of some acrylic if I install acrylic on there. But that means I'm going to have to really make a good fine edge with my acrylic and follow the contour of the wood here. And I think that can be accomplished by using my trim bit on my router. A lot of people say that you can use that and it'll cut through acrylic pretty easy. I would think that it would crack it or you know, burn it or something, but I guess you just adjust your speed until you get a good working speed with a router and the trim bit, and you can just lay the piece over here and have it cut within a half an inch or so of the size, and just real easily just follow it with your trim bit with your router and cut it out. And I've even seen some videos on YouTube where people cut their buttonholes out the same way. You just have your plexi mounted to it. You might have to drill your hole to get your bit started, and then plunge your trim bit down in there and have it set so that the bearing rides around the inside of the circles here for each button, but it sets low enough so that the cutting blade goes through the acrylic and you cut out your buttonholes. And it also be a big help with cutting out for a trackball, because you need this to be very close, especially when you're mounting like a little bezel. Mine came with like a little grommet or little bezel thing that goes around my trackball and sets it down in there, and you know, it only sits in about maybe 1/8 of an inch or so, and you can glue it in place, and it just gives you a nice look around the edge of your trackball. But lots of things to think about, and we're going to start probably putting artwork on. You'll probably see some of that in the next clip or so. Oh guys, it seems like I got a little bit ahead of myself. Luckily for me, I was looking at some pictures of where I took my Mortal Kombat 1 control panel apart and was doing some cleaning and joystick replacement on it. And I was just looking at the recess for the dust washers on there, thinking of if there was a way I could do it without too much trouble. But looks like I'm probably going to just go with either mounting the dust washers on top or underneath the 3/4 inch wood here on top of the joysticks themselves. We're going to figure that out later. But what I forgot is I've still got to drill holes to mount the joysticks, and it's not something that I can do necessarily after the artwork. I need to get that done before the artwork's on, because we're using these T-nuts. Now, I forgot all about that, and I'm glad I was looking at my pictures of the Mortal Kombat 1 panel, because it has T-nuts installed like this. And we have to install 4 for each joystick. There's going to be 1 at each corner where the joysticks mount. And we have to go ahead and you have to drill out so that the bolt can come through from the bottom, and you have to tap these in place. They have you can see from the side there, they have like little sharp edges. Let's see if I can get one. Might have to take it out of the bag for you. but on the sides of them, they have those little sharp, looks like blades or something that stick down into the wood there, and you tap them into place. So you would drill a hole out that was big enough for the bolt to come up through the middle of the T-nut, and these would sit down into the hole, but you tap them down with like a hammer, or you can put a block of wood on top and hit it with a hammer and knock those down flush with the wood. Well, I want to create a very slight recess for them to rest down into, so that at each location under the artwork you won't see a slight bulge from where those are. So I'll just take a spade bit that is the right diameter and everything, the same as the top of the T-nut, and I'll just, I'll drill the hole through first, and I'll come out with the spade bit, and I'll just kind of drill down maybe about a 1/16 of an inch or so, and just enough for that to be flush with the surface of the wood. And then we can put the artwork over it, and those will actually be kind of hidden, and when you mount the joystick from the bottom, you can run the bolts in from the bottom and it'll hold the joystick in place. You won't have any screw heads or anything obvious, because the tops of the T-nuts will be underneath the artwork. So that's really a good way of doing that. So I've got to get that done. That's not such a big problem. But I also got to thinking, I said, well, I'm not completely finished with the box. I want to put that black laminate on there. So I'm going to go ahead and take me some of my weldwood contact cement here, and don't have much in here left, but I don't need too much, because we're just going to cover the front of the control panel box and each side, and I've got just enough scrap from where we done the sides in black laminate that I can do that. It's going to be kind of close, but I'm pretty sure I've got enough that I can do that. So I'm going to do that, and also want to kind of think of what I'm going to do about the bolts that are sticking through there before I do that first piece, because I'm going to do the front piece before the side pieces. And I do want those kind of probably recessed. I don't think I want them showing. Wouldn't be that big a deal if this had black laminate across it and those were showing. At least it wouldn't if they were black, or if you paint them black. But if they're just silver, it might look just a little gaudy, so I don't know if I want to do that or not. So I may just go ahead and get a spade bit, put it in here, and that looks like it'd be about a 3/4 inch. Doesn't look like an inch, looks like about a 3/4 inch, and just center it on each hole and just drill down. It'd probably have to be almost a 1/4 inch, I know at least 1/8 of an inch, because you got to hide not only the washer but the head of these screws that need to go down into there. And that's pretty good though, because let me show you right quick. Remove the control panel top here. But let me set this down. But where the hinge is mounted here, I had picked up a few different bolts to put in, because I didn't know which ones were going to be so long that they would extend too far and bump into the housing on my trackball. And really the only one that would do that would be this one right here. So that's the only one you really have to worry about that with that. But right now it is just long enough to where the bolt does not come out of the nut on the other side. And these are those lock nuts that have a little piece of plastic in there, kind of locks onto the end of the bolt. But they can go, the bolt could probably tighten just a little deeper without going through the nut. But if I recess it, it's going to come in probably another 1/8 of an inch or so. Now I think I do have probably a 1/4 of an inch clearance or so before we hit the housing on the trackball here. So I got a little room to play with. So that will actually make it tighten on into this lock nut even better if we can recess the heads of the screws on the other side and the washers a little bit. So I'll probably end up doing that. But anyway, we're going to get on to that now. I'll do the recessing of the heads of these screws and washers first, and then I'll come back and just kind of clean my box and make sure there's not no loose dirt or material on it, which there shouldn't be. I just blew it off with the air hose a day or two ago. And then we'll go ahead and put our weldwood contact cement on the front, and we're going to put a piece on there that is big enough to cover the whole front, and it's kind of irregular shaped, but I'm just going to cut it off so it hangs off of every edge, and then we're going to come back with the trim router and trim that up, and then we'll do the sides the same way. The reason I'm doing the front first is I want to have a good flat edge here at this corner for my bearing on my trim bit to ride on, because at one time, I won't say what happened, but the control panel box was sitting here temporarily and got knocked off the cabinet and it hit the floor, and it made a little dent in the corner. Now the front edge is the worst. This side doesn't really look that bad, But what we're going to do is, if we put the laminate on the front first, the bearing can be set deep enough to ride on the good part of this wood, and it won't even hit that little chip there, and it will make a good clean edge all the way across the corner here on the piece of laminate that's installed on the front. Then when you glue the side piece on and it hangs over, when you go to trim it, that part right there, that defect right there, won't mess up your side piece of laminate, because the bearing will be riding against the new laminate you put on there, and since it goes all the way to the corner and makes a good sharp corner, the bearing can ride all the way down, and in turn this piece will end up with a good sharp corner, and they'll mate up without, you know, that deformity in the wood causing a problem when the bearing rides over it. So that's how we're going to do that first, and we'll come back later and drill a hole in the middle of these, and then drop our trim bit in there and just go around the inside to take the laminate off so you can put the button in. So a lot of work to do. Gonna get started on that.